And there is this collusion grievance that is out there. And, oh, by the way, they trying to get Bob McNair's phone stuff. And, whoo, boy, imagine being Bob McNair right now. You need a quarterback. There is literally no argument left that there's any quarterback out there that is better than Colin Kaepernick. Oh, by the way, your team has also adjusted his offense to fit Deshaun Watson in such a way that it is very difficult for you to make the argument that Kaepernick does not fit what it is that you are doing.
Can't hear all 3 hours of the right time? Check them out anytime, on demand, on the ESPN app.
Russillo!
McShay with Will Kane. Okay, Bama, Ohio State, neutral site.
Bama.
Neutral site, Georgia, Clemson.
Georgia.
Notre Dame, Penn State.
Notre Dame. Tough one, though.
Penn State.
Wisconsin, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and the kids have been there a long time.
Long time? I didn't think they have sunburn.
Ryan Russillo. Check him out weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Wake up.
Good morning.
And get up.
We are back in better than ever.
With Mike and Mike. Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Keep it locked to the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
It was an amazing run, and I think we all need to genuflect at how Vince Scully made it his entire life without giving an opinion that would be viewed as polarizing. Kira, put it on the poll. Is Vince Scully's lifetime of non-controversial comments the most unbreakable record in sports?
The Dan Le Batard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNradio.com.
Go ahead and update the polls.
Enough with the name changes, Diddy. Agree or disagree? Is the turnover chain the best thing in sport? Does Andy Reid's play sheet look like a Waffle House menu?
The Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Mike and Mike.
I tried to go trick-or-treating. I told my daughter, I said, Dylan, 4 o'clock trade deadline, 4:01, we're out the door. We're going to be ringing doorbells. We need a lot of candy. And I'm about to leave, and all of a sudden I get a call that the A.J. McCarron-Browns trade was almost near, and I'm on the phone, and I'm taking her trick-or-treating. This went on for about 2 hours. So the Cleveland Browns marred my Halloween trick-or-treat experience with my daughter. I'm still angry to this day.
Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Jalen and Jacoby on ESPN Radio.
I know you love the Obamas. I know you love Jim Harbaugh. I know you love Michigan football. Another thing I know you love, Jalen Rose, adult beverages. I've got some adult beverage news here. They've done some research, and I found this kind of shocking. In the last year, wine and beer sales have been slipping a little dramatically. However, hard liquor sales are going in the other direction. I have a lot of theories as to why this may be the case. Like, I think this is a health thing. I think that there are healthier options in hard liquor than there are in both wine and beer. Less calories, less sugar. Options in hard liquor. What do you think of that theory?
Get straight to it. You alluded to it. The bottom line is this: 12 ounces of beer or a shot of liquor.
Download and subscribe to the Jalen and Jacoby podcast on the ESPN app or wherever you listen to podcasts.
ESPN Radio Sports Center.
I'm Jim Baskell. Roy Halladay, a 2-time Cy Young Award winner who pitched a perfect game and a playoff no-hitter, died today when his private plane crashed in the Gulf of Mexico. He retired following the 2013 season, was an amateur pilot who often posted on social media about small planes. He's one of 7 pitchers to throw at least 2 no-hitters, one of 5 in league history with multiple Cy Young Awards and multiple no-hitters. He had 67 complete games in his career. Halladay was just 40 years old. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson held their spots in the top 4 of the college football playoff rankings. Unbeaten Miami moved up to number 7 prior to their matchup with the Irish. Oklahoma at number 5. TCU moves up to 6. Those 2 play as well this weekend. Unbeaten Wisconsin, number 8, the highest ranking Big Ten team, as Penn State and Ohio State both drop out after losses. ESPN's Jeff Goodman reporting 3 UCLA men's basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, the younger brother of Lonzo, arrested just days before their season opening game against Georgia Tech. The arrest came in Shanghai, China. ESPN's Mark Schlabach reporting a federal grand jury indicting former Auburn basketball assistant Chuck Person. He was among 10 men arrested late September as part of an FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball. The Suns today deal Eric Bledsoe to the Bucks for Greg Monroe and a pair of 2018 picks, including a first-rounder. Speaking of Milwaukee, they're playing in Cleveland, trailing in the fourth, 97-93.
The 12th-ranked Washington Huskies try to stay at the top of the Pac-12 North standings when they host the Oregon Ducks. Coverage begins Saturday at 9 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Presented by Dr. Pepper. Izzy in Spain on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Izzy in Spain, it's Sarah Spain, Laura Rutledge in with me all night tonight, this Tuesday night. A great night to have her. We'll react a ton to the college football rankings that just came out. Get into some more petty NBA news, which there always seems to be a plethora of. Talk about NFL quarterbacks that are struggling or returning. And also just break down, like I said, all the college football stuff beyond the top four, getting into the weeds a little bit on some conferences that are looking a little bit rough right now in terms of their hopes to be a part of the playoff. But we want to start off tonight's show with some sad news. If you hadn't yet heard, Roy Halladay, former two-time Cy Young Award winner, passed away today. He died in a plane crash in the Gulf of Mexico at just 40 years old. He had earned his pilot's license a couple years ago, and his Twitter, if you looked at it lately, was full of shots of his new plane, of time spent in the air, and how joyful he was about this new part of his life post-retirement. And it was an Icon A5, a single-engine aircraft. There were apparently no calls of distress, but his plane and his body were found in the Gulf of Mexico. And Laura, just such sad news. I mean, 40 is so young, and also to look at the joy that he felt in following up. His father was a pilot, following up on that, and for it to end like this is just tragic.
Yeah, it just seeing it come across Twitter and other news outlets, I almost didn't think it was real. I was like, wait a second, Roy Halladay is so young, and he truly was only 40 years old. And just seeing the way that Major League Baseball has reacted to this, and seeing the way that former teammates and just people that had so much respect for him have reacted, you can just see the impact that he had in a life that just was lost way too young.
We'll talk to Dan Schulman about Halladay, and we'll share some thoughts from those who covered and played with him throughout the show. Remembering Roy Halladay, he was just 40 years old. But we need to get into some other stuff as well. We'll continue to reflect on him, and we'll move on to the sports of the day, because that's what we always have to do, even when tragedies like this strike our industry. And the big news, of course, is the latest college football rankings. And Laura, I don't know if you were shocked, but no changes in the top four. A lot of movement down below. Did you think that was the right move in terms of the top four teams remaining the same as last week?
Yeah, I think, Sarah, if you look at the top four, the committee didn't have a reason to change. They made a big statement by putting Georgia at number 1 over Alabama at number 2 in their first release of the rankings last week. And, because both of these two teams in Georgia and Alabama beat their respective opponents by the same amount, 14 points, there wasn't a whole lot of change to be made. And Kirby Hocutt, the committee chair, did say that they thought maybe the win over LSU that Alabama had was a little bit better than Georgia's win over South Carolina, because LSU would be a more competitive opponent. But it's at this point, it's so close between those two. The one thing that did surprise me a little bit is I would have thought that Miami would have been ahead of TCU. So I would have had Miami at the number 6 team, Oklahoma being, of course, that number 5 ranked team. But the committee is still high on TCU and keeping them there, and then Miami at number 7. And you think that what's happened with Miami is that people just aren't fully convinced that they're completely back. I think they are, although they have won some games games close. And so they've got a big test this weekend, and we'll be able to decide it truly is the U back. And, I hate to make one game be the whole decision maker of that. But either way, I think this success for Miami has been great for college football. And then once again, I think the other thing that jumps off the page at you is that Wisconsin at number 8, they're an undefeated team, and yet the committee is giving them virtually very little respect. And at this point, it just shows that this committee is supposed to pick, they are charged with picking the 4 best teams in college football. They don't think that Wisconsin is in that conversation yet for those 4 best teams, but so much can change. We're only in week 2 of this, and November can always be crazy. And if carnage happens ahead of Wisconsin and they win the Big Ten championship and they add some sort of cachet to their resume, then they'll look a little bit different down the stretch and could factor in. But right now, Wisconsin fans, I think, have a right to be upset, but this is what this is. There aren't computers involved in this anymore. These are humans looking at what matters most, and they sit in that room there in Grapevine, Texas at the Gaylord Texan, and they have a million computer screens around them. But at the end of the day, yes, the numbers factor in. Yes, strength of record, strength of schedule, all of those buzzwords that you hear so many times. But they have to look at that top 4 and really the top 6 and say, we're comfortable with that. If they're not, they revote. They revote again. They keep going until they feel like they've got those 4 best teams they can put their names on at this point in the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we've got plenty of time. College football playoffs, since it began, very rarely have the teams that were in the first round of rankings or even second ended up in the same spots in top 4 when it came down to the last week. So there's plenty of time for movement. There's time for teams to drop and teams to rise. You mentioned Wisconsin. Listen, it's super hard to go undefeated, but strength of schedule matters. And when they scheduled their season, I'm certain that they thought a couple of the teams that they were going to face would come out as stronger victories. That hasn't happened for them. And then when they schedule gimmies, that doesn't help them at all. Do you see things on the remaining schedule for them that they could try to spin as a reason that they should be viewed better?
Well, yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is that Iowa, their opponent this week, is ranked 20th in this particular college football playoff rankings. And what they're supposed to do is look at each week as a snapshot. So, for instance, if you go back to week 1, Florida State and Alabama's win over Florida State, well, now that looks like not really a great win because Florida State has fallen off the map. But still, the committee's supposed to view that win as what it was on that night, which I would say that on that night, FSU was a team that would have beat many teams in college football. They've certainly fallen off the map after that. Now, 20th ranked Iowa against Wisconsin, that gives Wisconsin a chance to say, we've got a top 25 win, which that is what they are so hungry for. They need so badly to prove. If they can get that win, and, keep in mind, that game is not at Kinnick, that is at Wisconsin. That helps Wisconsin, helps the Badgers. And I think at this point, they need to beat Iowa. They need to continue on. They've got to beat whoever they play in the Big Ten championship, which at this point, let's say it's maybe a Michigan State that's climbed up there. Right now, they're at the 12th spot. Then you build your resume. Then you make a case for yourself. And while the committee isn't solely stuck on conference championships, it is hard to ignore, certainly undefeated, and then also a conference champion.
Talking to Laura M. Rutledge. That's where you can find her on Twitter. And she is going to hopefully be in with me most Tuesdays for a little while now, coming on right after these rankings hit to kind of give me the research and knowledge that I need. This is not my wheelhouse, college football, although I'm getting better. We're going to get into my college football bachelorette later in the show, Laura, because you heard about that way back when, and now it is whittled down to 2 teams, so I'm going to need your insight on that. Laura, of course, can be found on the SEC Network and on ESPN talking college football, so this is your wheelhouse. I'm wondering, we're looking at a possibility of 2 or 3 Power 5 conferences not being involved at all. You mentioned Wisconsin. The Big Ten's hopes pretty much resting on them. And then the Pac-12 has almost no shot. Do you think that there's, I hate is this good for, is this bad for? We always hear that, and that doesn't really matter. You want the best teams in, but when you got a lineup like you do now where it's really heavy in the ACC, SEC, does that seem like a positive for college football?
Yeah, I think it could go either way. I do think the invention of the playoff was to get the 4 best teams in. And, if you look back at the past few years, you could say that the 4 best teams were in, but you could also say that some of these teams should have been in. I mean, I would mention, maybe even a Baylor or TCU a couple years ago. They felt like they missed out on opportunities. And really what's been unfortunate for the College Football Playoff Committee, and look, they can't get out there and make each player do exactly what they want them to do, but these have been blowout games, and that's not good good for the semifinal. While the national championship has been a good game over the last couple of years, certainly between Alabama and Clemson, the semifinals have not lived up to the billing. And so when you look at that, obviously the committee cannot sit there and say, okay, well, we think this is going to happen, so we're going to put these two teams together. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to look at it as just the 4 best. But if you see multiple teams from one conference in there, I don't know that that's really what they want. Now, they won't ever come out and admit that, but I would say that after doing the College Football Playoff Mock Selection Committee earlier this year, and just in talking with some of these people who are very close to this, they don't really want it to be that lopsided. Now, this year has to be and will be the most difficult for this committee, I think, especially the way that it's gone so far. Unless things really start to figure themselves out, they could really be left with some tough decisions to make. And, by the way, we're talking about right now maybe the ACC and the SEC being the 2 conferences that could have 2 teams in potentially. But, we've written off the Pac-12, but we really can't completely write off the Pac-12. And that's the beauty of this college football playoff era, because Washington's there at number 9 saying, hey, wait a second, don't forget about us. If we're a conference champion and, maybe we have some resume builders that would actually mean a lot, hey, who knows? So Notre Dame is a team that right now their one loss looks the best of any team's one loss. Clemson's one loss, it seems as though the committee's looking at it as just an aberration. They went to Syracuse. Their quarterback, Kelly Bryant, wasn't healthy. It was the perfect storm. But that doesn't quite fall in line with the way that they're looking at other teams. So they seem to be taking each team specifically, which they are able to do and allowed to do at this point. And really, they're allowed to do whatever they want, honestly. I mean, who am I to say what they should and shouldn't do? But we're going to make you say it later, because that's the whole point of being a gas bag on the radio is just blubbering on with your own opinions and not having respect for people who spend hours and hours coming up with these things based on very specific facts. But later in the show, I do want to get into the 5 and the 6 facing off this week, which is going to be huge, and then Miami, Notre Dame facing off. So we've got a lot of good college football playoff affecting games coming up this weekend. But coming up next, we are going to talk to Dan Schulman. He covered Roy Halladay for years in Toronto. He's going to share his thoughts on Roy's passing today. This is Izzy in Spain on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. And all of our guests will join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge with you tonight on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
The NFL.
I wouldn't say that they quit on McAdoo. I think they kind of tuned him out. The difference is the way that you continue to get paid in this game is by you making plays.
ESPN Radio.
We're with Formula Drift World Champion Chris Forsberg. Chris, you have a lot in common with Champion Wipers?
Oh, you mean because Champion Blades control any conditions just like I control any drift?
Why, yes.
And Champion Wipers clean up a windshield just like I clean up at the track?
Oh, didn't think of that one. What else?
And we both
are champions. That's the easy one, Chris.
Introducing Champion Wiper Blades, built to handle all kinds of weather, made for the champion in all of us. Available at Pep Boys or visit championautoparts.com.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Football Sunday on ESPN Radio. The Packers have dropped 3 straight and 2 without Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley showed signs of promise Monday night, but now they head to Soldier Field as underdogs for the first time in 9 years when they face the Bears.
Take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears.
Football Sunday. The Packers and Bears.
We're working our way towards kickoff.
Noon Eastern on ESPN Radio.
It's always time for the right time.
When a 3-time All-Pro wants to talk to you about what his experience is like playing against Tom Brady, let the man on the line. We got Trevor Price.
I have sacked Tom Brady several times. I have hit him several times. And that mess he's saying about his body kind of goes soft and limp before it hits the ground, that is 100% true. You're like hitting a pillow.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weekdays from 4 to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio or on the ESPN app. Bomani.
Russillo Show.
Andrew Luck out for the season.
He's 28 years of age, and we may have already seen the best of Andrew Luck.
I don't think it's hyperbole. It just seems soon. Like, let's see what 2018 is all about. Well, we already know what's going to happen, though. Whenever the next time he takes the field, never felt better. We're all going to hear the right things.
The PR campaign comes out.
Exactly. But I don't think it's irresponsible to go, we may not see it again.
The Ryan Russillo Show. Weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Oye, amigo, it is the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
Roy, was Dugat supposed to read something there? Because he was searching, he was rummaging through the garbage can. What he didn't throw away is what he was wearing me out with, which is, hey, Dan, I'm 24-21-1 this year against the spread in the NFL.
I found it.
Dug up chicken shreds from 4 months ago from the bottom of that garbage can.
The Dan Le Batard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNRadio.com.
Welcome back to Izzy in Spain. Sarah Spain with Laura Rutledge in with me tonight. We are presenting Progressive Insurance. You can always tweet us on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Happy now to be joined by Dan Schulman to react to the news today. Terrible news of Roy Halladay dying in a plane crash, just 40 years old. He was flying the plane. He had gotten his license just a few years ago, and Dan covered him extensively. So, Dan, just your reaction, first off, to the news today.
Well, shocked beyond belief. I mean, I covered him a lot in his early years. I'm from Toronto, did and do Blue Jays games, and Roy came up with Blue Jays, and continued to cover him with ESPN with both the Blue Jays and the Phillies. So just absolute shock. Actually saw him a couple of months ago when he was inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, and he talked extensively about flying. It's something he really loved. His dad was a pilot, so he kind of grew up, in that environment, and he always wanted to fly, and just so tragic. I mean, a guy who was just entering the next chapter of his life, and he only cared about two things, his family and flying, and that was it. And, he coached his boys in baseball, and it's just a tremendous loss. I mean, it's a huge loss, obviously, for the baseball fraternity, but much more importantly for his wife and two boys. I mean, just such a tragedy.
Dan, we've seen that baseball fraternity react, certainly, and many other people around sports, but just interacting with him in clubhouses, as I imagine you did over the years, what was he like?
He was private. He was private and quiet. He didn't love sitting down in front of a camera or getting in front of a microphone and talking about himself. But he had as much substance to him as about anybody that I ever covered. I mean, there was no flash, but there was tons of substance. He was an incredibly hard worker, very dedicated. Never pounded his chest, never made it about him. All he wanted to do was go out and do the job. Just give him the ball, let him try to go throw 9 innings, which he did better than just about anybody else in his era, and help his team win. He overcame a lot. I'm sure you guys have discussed it a little bit, but in 2000, his third year in the majors, he was sent down to A-ball. They reworked his mechanics. They reworked his mentality, his psyche. He became a big believer in sports psychology, and he just made himself into a better pitcher and a much tougher person on the mound. His workouts were legendary. Younger pitchers flocked to him for advice and just followed after him. He didn't mentor with words. He mentored with actions. And he was as universally respected, I think, as any player that I've ever covered, whether it was teammates or opponents. Everybody had nothing but praise for him.
Talking to Dan Schulman about Roy Halladay, who passed away today at the age of 40 in a plane crash. Halladay signed a one-day contract with Toronto in 2013 so he could retire as a member of the Blue Jays, spent the first 12 years of his career there, and meant so much to Canada and to baseball fans up there and to the Blue Jays. There's something very special about his connection to that.
There really is, and it's kind of a unique baseball environment up here. It's the team has a national following. I mean, there are 35 million people in the country, and they're separated from coast to coast by as much as 3,000 miles. But this team has fans everywhere, and Roy embraced Toronto and embraced Canada. And he knew how popular he was. Again, fans just adored him because all he did was work hard and try to win. And they adored him. And when he came back and signed that one-day ceremonial contract, that meant a lot up here. It's Canadians are touched when an American embraces Canada. And Roy certainly did that. He was very, very fond of the people here, and he knew how fond they were of them. So the fact that he came back here and did that was great. And he was also known as one of the, if not the most charitable person in the organization in many, many years. He did a ton of work in the community in Toronto and other cities in Canada. I'm sure he continued to do the same in his time in Philadelphia. So, he left his mark on the field. But, from friends and family and just people I know texting and talking tonight, very few are talking about his pitching, as great as that was. Most people are talking about the kind of person that he was.
Dan, you know the sport of baseball really well, and a lot of people realize this that are close to it, but I don't know if people who aren't as close realize just how much of a family sport it is and how it seems as though over the last few years we've lost quite a few players, impactful players at very young ages to just tragic accidents. How do you think these types of things affect just the baseball community?
It's hard to say. I mean, this will definitely affect so many people. You've seen, I'm sure you've discussed the tweets and the messages that former teammates of Roy have put out today. I don't know how it'll affect people. I mean, Roy died doing something he loved, and this is something that he wanted to do as soon as he retired. But I think, it'll make everybody hug their kids a little bit more and live in the moment a little bit more and be thankful for what we do have a little bit more. I mean, the world's a very complicated place right now on many levels, and I think a lot of people just are really doing a lot of thinking today. I mean, when a guy is big and strong and beloved as Roy Halladay loses his life at such a young age, I think it makes you think about a lot of things on a lot of levels.
Before we let you go, he's also eligible for the Hall of Fame in 2019, and it feels odd to talk about his baseball prowess, but there is some sort of, I think, closure for people when there's this moment to remember in a very meaningful and powerful way. Do you think there's a chance that will happen as early as 2019 for him?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think he eventually gets in. Whether it's first ballot or not is complicated because you can only vote so many people in. It depends who else is on the ballot, but I think he will get in. I think his numbers look like Hall of Fame numbers. His career was a year or two shorter than it should have been because of a shoulder injury, but his numbers are very strong. I mean, 2 Cy Youngs, 1 in each league, a perfect game, a no-hitter in the playoffs, won 20 games 3 times, tons of complete games, and led the league in innings a number of times. I think he will go in, and I would venture to say, I mean, we haven't had this situation very often where somebody goes into the Hall of Fame after they passed away, and I'm sure I speak for Philadelphia fans as well, but speaking for Canadian fans, if the day comes where Roy goes into the Hall of Fame, I think you're going to see huge numbers of people in Cooperstown. It'll be a very emotional ceremony.
Well, we thank you so much for giving us your time and your memories, Dan. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
All right, thank you.
Dan Schulman with his thoughts on the passing of Roy Halladay today. More ESPN coming up next.
Mike McCarthy, it's time for you to take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears. They run a jet sweep, and Glover came over for a beautiful stop.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
I have a much better handle now after watching Boston play with Kyrie a couple times as to part of the fury that Kyrie had about what his situation was in Cleveland. One mistake I think that we make with NBA players is that we don't realize most of those guys want to be coached. Most of those guys want someone that's going to put them in position to be better. Because most of these cats come up when they're young where everybody's just rolling the ball out to them, and then they get to the league and they realize having the ball rolled to them isn't going to be enough, and you're going to need to have somebody there that makes it better for you. Right? Like, I think guys get to that realization. And so Kyrie is now in a situation where I don't have bad things to say about Lou, but Lou ain't Stevens. right? Like, Stevens is really, 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 really good at this, and he does seem to be putting Kyrie in positions that make him look even better than he was when we had seen him before.
Can't hear all 3 hours of the right time? Check them out anytime on demand on the ESPN app.
Some of the most severe sanctions in the NFL's history resulted from Bounty Gate.
Everyone's like, oh yeah, they're just dirty players. That's why they won the Super Bowl and all this stuff.
In the latest sit-down with Ryan Russillo, we get the inside story on Bounty Gate from former Saint Jonathan Vilma.
I put up $5,000 of my own money to start the season. I get paid for violence.
Bounty Gate, tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern on the Ryan Russillo Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Wherever you are, we are. Your radio, your phone, your computer. This is ESPN Radio.
See, very intrigued by the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
You're right on with Tyson here, because up until the end of his career, he didn't fight anyone.
Yes, he didn't fight anybody, and then he became a phenomenon anyways, because he was crazy, because he was young, and because his style was impetuous. His defense was impregnable. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
The Dan Le Batard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNRadio.com. What make you laugh this weekend?
Guillermo, what do you got?
A-Rod and J-Lo were at the UM game this weekend. They put them on the Kiss Cam, and they denied us peasants of what we wanted most, Kiss.
Why?
They're usually so public with their displays of affection.
They're in Vanity Fair.
It seemed like they had no idea what the Kiss Cam was.
What a comeback. They're America's first couple.
They really are.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Mike and Mike.
Why did the Patriots trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers yesterday?
Going back to the spring, the Patriots made attempts to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo to keep him in New England, and they were unable to do so. And they continued to try, and they continued not to be able to get things done. It became apparent after a certain amount of time that they were not going to be able to re-sign him, that obviously the opportunities and money were going to be too great on the market.
Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Welcome to Between Two Rexes. Let's just say they were going to do a low-budget, clearly, life story of Matt Houseback, because I'm sure that movie's coming out anytime soon. Who would be the actor?
Yeah,
that
it's a
would
good
play
question,
you?
Rex.
Vin Diesel, any other bald guy
like
you can
Woody
think
Harrelson,
of?
maybe?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good one.
Who would play you?
It's not about me here,
Okay,
Tim.
sorry.
Matt, one of you Hasselbacks. What's the difference?
Sunday NFL Countdown, 10 Eastern on ESPN. And now, a Mike and Mike throwback moment.
Drake Gyllenhaal is in our studio. So many of the superhero movies out now. If you could be one, which one would you like to be?
Batman is, I mean, come on. Are you kidding me?
Without prejudicing the jury, in your opinion, is Batman a superhero?
No, not really.
Not
yes,
really.
he is.
Of course he is. Not only is he a superhero, he's the best of the superheroes.
What do you mean, man? He doesn't fly. He just has a cape.
Hashtag MM Say Thanks. Presented by Amazon Music Unlimited. ESPN Radio Sports Center.
I'm Jim Bass. Well, sadness from Major League Baseball today.
The pitch. Swing and attack right in front of the plate. Ruiz picks it up, fires to first. It's a no-hitter for Roy Halladay. In Philadelphia, he paints an absolute masterpiece and joins Don Larson as the only two men to allow no hits in a postseason game.
Two-time Cy Young Award winner Roy Halladay died today at the age of 40 when his private plane crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. The 8-time All-Star threw a perfect game in the regular season, a no-hitter, as you heard, in the playoffs, won 203 games over 12 Major League seasons. He's one of only 5 pitchers in Major League history with multiple Cy Young Awards and multiple no-hitters. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson held their spots in the top 4 of the college football playoff rankings. Unbeaten Miami moved up 3 spots to number 7 prior to their matchup with the Fighting Irish. Oklahoma remained at 5. TCU moves up to 6, and it's those two also playing this Saturday, dropping out Penn State and Ohio State. ESPN's Jeff Goodman reporting 3 UCLA men's basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, the younger brother of Lonzo, arrested in China just days before Friday's season opening game against Georgia Tech, arrested on shoplifting charges. Meantime, the Suns today trading guard Eric Bledsoe to the Milwaukee Bucks for forward Greg Monroe and 2 draft picks, including a 2018 first-rounder, which is protected. Speaking of the Bucks, this final just in as Milwaukee falls to the Cleveland Cavaliers 124-119 despite 40 for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Kevin Love, 32 points, 16 rebounds, doing so on just 14 total shots. Packers coach Mike McCarthy confirms that offensive tackle Brian Bulaga is out for the season, torn ACL in his right knee. The 1-game suspension for Bucs wide receiver Mike Evans has been upheld after he drilled Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore on Sunday. It'll cost him over $40,000.
Lincoln Riley was critical of those saying the Big 12 doesn't play defense. Just how hard is it to stop the offenses in the conference? We'll ask Riley when he joins Mike and Mike Wednesday morning at 8 on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Welcome back to Izzy in Spain. It's Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge with you on this Tuesday night, presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll talk to Tavares King from the Giants a little later in the show. You can always hit us up on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. But now it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Big news in the NFL as the saga out in Indianapolis continues. Now, Laura, it is extended beyond just questions about whether or not the Colts misled fans and reporters about Andrew Luck's injury. Now it's a question internally between Jim Irsay and Andrew Luck, and this all came to light because Tony Dungy was on the Dan Patrick Show, and in a moment that he believed to be a commercial break, shared this information with Dan Patrick.
The Andrew Luck situation, though.
I don't know what's going on there. I really don't. And is he going to play? Jim Irsay made a comment about 6 weeks ago. You know, it's inside his head now, and then now you're hearing that this has been 25 months. And
wait, it's inside Luck's head?
Yeah, he said that maybe when I guess when I was up there for Peyton's ceremony.
Wow.
Wow. Also, wow, that's a very long commercial break, and it's a lot of talking to do while you don't realize that you're on the air. And that sounded like Red Hot Chili Peppers in the background. But, Laura, this to me was sort of unbelievable. And we've heard a lot out of Jim Irsay in the years that has been unbelievable or ill-advised. But to question Andrew Luck's ability to play and say that it's a mental choice seems a bit beyond the pale to me.
Yeah, the soundtrack there was just epic, but the actual meat of that conversation was even more epic. And I really think what you're looking at is a situation. I mean, how does Jim Irsay know what's inside Andrew Luck's head? He doesn't know. He's not in Andrew Luck's head. I don't know Andrew Luck personally, but everything I've seen about him and just knowing the level of, honestly, level-headedness that Andrew Luck is known for, he is not a guy that really gets in his head. By my estimation, I'm no doctor over here, but you see what happened with Andrew Luck. Something went wrong with his surgery. Something has gone wrong in his recovery for this. Matt Hasselbeck's a guy who's had a surgery similar to this. He talked about it. This can go right, and then you have a quick recovery. If it doesn't, you don't recover as quickly. I don't think this has anything to do with it being in Andrew Luck's head. And even if it did, how does Jim Irsay know?
Right, and it's also, why would you be telling either Tony Dungy? I think Dungy later clarified and said he didn't hear it directly from him, but whoever you're telling is spreading it. And our guy Louis Riddick said, I think it was on Russillo today, don't be a tough guy with someone else's body. And that's the perfect way of putting it, right? Unless Andrew Luck is going public with this, or even if he is coming straight to you, I don't believe you should share it. But he just doesn't strike me as a guy who's ever been afraid of being out there, right? He's had several very serious injuries, and this does not strike me as an issue that would be held up by his mental concerns. It sounds like, and we've heard doctors say that this kind of surgery can sometimes take 9 months to a full year for someone to feel normal again. And we have these crazy expectations, Laura, for people that are athletes. That doesn't mean that they're superhuman. Sometimes either the surgery goes wrong or it just takes longer than you anticipated. And I think it's really Irsay's fault for coming out so strongly early on with claims of when he'd return.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, yes, as I was saying before with the Hasselbeck thing, you know, he's had a similar surgery, and he told me point blank earlier this year that if it goes well, you can have a quick recovery, but everybody's body is different. It also depends on the wear and tear of your muscles, and not to get too focused in on all of that side of things, but I do think that people were premature in just expecting that Andrew Luck would be this superhuman and come back so quickly. And the one thing too, Andrew Luck is not somebody that it has a weak mind that gets in his head. I mean, obviously everybody coming back from injury and every athlete has to deal with that level of wondering what it's going to be like and wondering if they can truly trust it, especially a quarterback being able to truly trust that arm. But that's not what's going on here, in my opinion. And I really think that this has now made things incredibly awkward. And maybe they were already awkward and we don't know about that because Andrew Luck is not one of those guys to come out and say any of that. And frankly, he hasn't really been meeting with the media anyway. But I don't understand now how you go from here when you know that the owner is questioning your mental fortitude. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that fear of trusting your arm. How about trusting that the team has put enough people around you to protect you? Because the fact that it's Irsay saying about him, well, I don't know if his head's really in the game. I don't know if he's ready to get back in there and take the blows. That's like the person who jumps out from behind a wall before you go to bed every night and scares you, then saying, how come you're always so scared when you go to bed? Well, because you haven't given me an offensive line for years. Because, hey, let's keep drafting other positions and watching our franchise quarterback get absolutely crushed and then question whether or not, you know, that's had any effect on him. And I still don't believe it has. I still believe he's a guy that's, you know, going to go out there and sit in the pocket and take it. But it's just an extra insult to injury, literally, to then question a guy who you've put in that position. Louis Riddick, ESPN NFL insider, mentioned earlier, had that great line, you know, don't be a tough guy with someone else's body. But he was on SportsCenter with David Lloyd today and also talked about just when you violated the trust of this player this way, how much more complicated it makes things.
Now you're moving on to the next phase of this issue here, which is relationships between a franchise quarterback who you obviously have invested a lot of money into, and you're violating some trust here. You absolutely are. So now that's going to add another layer of a mental hurdle for Andrew to kind of overcome here, because now he's going, now is the owner actually sitting here talking about me behind my back? You know, maybe it is inside my head a little bit, and we all know that, and we all need to be sensitive to that. But don't start expressing that to other people. And now that it's gotten out there, now when you walk in the building and you see this guy, I'm telling you, relationships, I talk about this all the time here. Every time we talk about team building and how and really what separates good teams from great teams and great teams from championship teams, it's these kind of relationships. That's not the kind of thing Jim Irsay wants to start rolling here as far as valuing the trust of someone who you paid a lot of money to.
I mean, absolutely. And there's already been a lot of questions about Jim Irsay out in Indy, and I think if you are a fan of that team, you're already distraught about the prognosis for Luck and what this means for him going forward, not just next season, but forever. But also in just the way this has been managed. And I think it's pretty clear, Laura, that I don't believe that they were lying intentionally, because I think if they knew about all this, they would have found a better answer in terms of a backup, right? They wouldn't have left themselves so open to this being a lost season if they knew that he wasn't going to be back. I think this is just something that happens. He didn't recover the way they thought.
Right, and sometimes you're in the midst of recovery and you think things are going well and you have a setback. And we haven't been there every step of the way for Andrew Luck's recovery, but obviously that's what's going on here. And I think, too, you know, there were talks about him getting second, third opinions. You wonder if something did truly go wrong in this surgery, if he would have to get it again. And this is just purely me speculating on this because I don't know what would happen in that case. But obviously they want to avoid that at all costs if they can. They also need their franchise quarterback to be healthy. And like we're saying here, you know, not only is his health in question here, but also just the relationships at the team, which are most important when you think about the players that are cornerstones of your franchise. That needs to work. Those things need to work. Forsberg. One thing, too, that I take away from all this, don't talk during the commercial break about anything that you don't want out there. Dangerous.
That's also
dangerous
usually when you drop like an F-bomb and you thought you were off.
Right.
Yeah. Or
we've all been
somebody.
there. Yeah. Don't be doing that. Just remember, live mics at all times.
It's like the radio equivalent of accidentally like sending out a DM to your whole Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like,
well,
I
who hasn't
recently
done that,
responded
too?
to
You're
my
right.
husband, and I thought I was responding to my husband's text asking him to get me gloves and a hat for a baseball game from the shelf by the kitchen, but I accidentally responded to the direct message alert that I get in my texts, which I did not realize if you respond to that, it just sends out a tweet. You don't respond to the direct message. No, you don't respond to that person. You respond to all of Twitter.
You just broke some news to me because I didn't know that either. And thank you for that. I am now.
I don't know if you have those alerts set up, but
I don't. But if I ever did, and maybe
now
just for those of you out there that do, just fair warning right here.
Yes,
we are educating people around about how to be better on Twitter. But yeah, you know what? Right. This one more thing on this Andrew Luck thing. This is not going away because Andrew Luck is not healthy. So the longer that this goes on, where he's not healthy, and the longer that there are question marks about, whether or not he's going to play and when he's going to come back and what this Colts team looks like, this is going to continue on. And at some point, Irsay's going to have to come out and say, well, what the heck he was talking about. And
it's going to be ugly. And Irsay's going to have to answer to it now, and the team's going to be dealing with it for the rest of the season. This was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight ahead, what's the mood like in the Giants locker room after falling to 0-7? We'll ask one of their wide receivers. That's next. ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Mike McCarthy, it's time for you to take off the training wheel. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears. They run a jet sweep, and Glover came over for a beautiful stop.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year. Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
54-yard touchdown pass.
This is Pat Narduzzi, head football coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers.
Hi, this is Larry Fedor, head football coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels.
This is college football
on ESPN Radio.
Let's go. We came to eat. We came to eat.
Do you believe that you can win this fight tonight?
The North Carolina Tar Heels travel to Pittsburgh to face the Pitt Panthers. Coverage begins Thursday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Presented by the 2018 Ford F-150. Football Sunday.
Touchdown. That's quite a throw and catch.
The Packers face the second of back-to-back division foes when they invade Soldier Field in Chicago. Football Sunday, noon Eastern on ESPN Radio.
The right time. It's always time for the right time.
Do not pretend as though we don't typically show some understanding when people are grieving and just kind of be like, hey, man, get out of his face. Give him his space or whatever it is. Except in these basketball broadcasts, we are not giving this dude this space. What we're doing with Isaiah Thomas is we are taking that man's personal pain and turning it into a corny sports narrative.
The right time with Bomani Jones. Weekdays from 4 to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio or on the ESPN app.
Levitard. The Dan Levitard Show, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Reaper, you're not allowed to talk! The Dan Levitard Show with the Stugats.
Halloween! Kids in costumes going door to door collecting candy. Anybody can spend $200 by a professionally made get-up and strut around showing up everybody else. Those are the rich kids who get a sweaty palm full of loose candy corn from me. I'm Greg Cody. Yeah, that's how it was back in my day.
Catch more of the Dan Levitard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Mike and Mike.
Why did the Patriots trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers yesterday?
Going back to the spring, the Patriots made attempts to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo, to keep him in New England. And they were unable to do so. And they continued to try, and they continued not to be able to get something done. It became apparent after a certain amount of time that they were not going to be able to re-sign him. That obviously the opportunities and money were going to be too great on the market.
Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Spain. Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge with you. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You can always hit us up on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Laura's going to take a break and check out some college football stuff to bone up for me quizzing her later on more of the latest rankings. But now we're going to get into a quick chat with Tavares King, wide receiver for the Giants. He's brought to you by Upside, upside.com. Low prices, great rewards, 6-star service. You deserve a better business trip, upside.com. Let's go out to Tavares. So, Tavares, let's start with the college stuff. How good does it feel to see your Georgia Bulldogs #1 in the rankings for a second straight week?
Oh man, it's amazing! It's amazing. Just super excited for those guys. They look tremendous out there. Coach Kirby's got those guys rolling.
How often do you get to watch? Do you find time on Saturdays?
Absolutely. I've watched every game that I've been able to watch, and those guys look good. Super excited about Jake Fromm stepping into a big role as a freshman. In an SEC environment, that's huge. And you got those backs we have are tremendous out there. And like I said earlier, Coach Kirby's got those guys on defense just rolling. So it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, you never got to play for Kirby Smart, but I'm certain you're hearing from the Georgia family about what he's done for the program. What are they telling you?
Oh man, just so much from a recruiting standpoint. Just I think things have taken a major turn. I think he's gotten the #1 running back right now committed, along with the #1 quarterback committed as well. So I just think that from that aspect, things have taken a major turn.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to the NFL. You got your first TD after being in the league since 2013. What was that like?
It was cool. It was awesome. Anytime I get an opportunity to, help my team, I love to. It was actually my first regular season one. So that was awesome.
And not a ton of touchdowns this year, not a ton going right for your team. And, that's always tough for any team. I'm a Bears fan, so we've had a couple rough years out here. And, what do you do in the locker room to stay up?
I mean, you just keep the main thing, and that's trying to stick together and win games. Try to progress and get better every day, and try to get a win.
Talking to Tavares King, wide receiver for the Giants, when a team isn't playing well, everything blows up, right? You can get away with anything if you're winning. You don't get analyzed, you don't get criticized. But when you're not putting the W's up, people are trying to find answers, and there are people saying that this team has quit. Do you feel like there are guys on the team that has quit this season?
Absolutely not. I'm there every day. We put in so much work. We've put in so much work on a consistent basis, day in and day out, and things just hadn't gone in our favor. We've had a few injuries, we've had some miscues and things of that sort that have kept us from winning ball games, and when you do things and you shoot yourself in the foot, sometimes it's tough to win games in this league.
Tavares King, wide receiver for the New York Giants. Coach McAdoo saying the team might start playing some younger guys going forward, including possibly sending Eli Manning to the bench, which is crazy. We've seen he has been the New York Giants for such a long time. How do you think the offense would react to Eli getting benched?
I'm not sure about that happening or anything like that. But, whatever goes on and whatever anybody decides, we will roll with whatever is out there. I feel like Eli is our quarterback. He's our guy.
Right. And then if he's not, you show up for whoever is, right? You got to put in the same work.
Absolutely.
What's the relationship like between you and Eli Manning? You guys have played a couple years together now. What are your interactions like?
It's awesome. It's cool. You know, he's super cool guy, super funny, great leader. You know, got to spend a lot of time with him this off season. We did a little Manning camp over at Duke with some of the receivers, so that was awesome. Got to spend some one-on-one time with E, and you know, got to spend some time with him off the field, and you know, get to know his personality. And he's a great guy.
When you are looking at a season like this that feels really big, right? There's big changes that might happen. Do you caution fans or management to not overreact to one season, or do you feel like there are some big changes that need to be made for this team going forward?
I mean, I don't think nobody should overreact. I mean, like I said, when you do things, we were in games early, and when you do things in games, ball games, like turn the ball over and have miscues like we've had, it's tough to win games. So I don't think nobody should hit a panic button. I think that you know, we gotta keep the main thing, and that's progressing. You always gotta progress. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, when you're looking at a season like this, obviously the main goal is still to get wins. You're 1-7. We want to put more W's on the board. But are there other little goals that you set for yourself to kind of keep you motivated and find some focus?
I mean, definitely, it's an opportunity for everybody out there to showcase what they can do. Definitely, but I mean, you play the game because you love the game. If you're playing it for the right reason, so I mean, every opportunity that you have to be out there. You want to play the game and play it the right way and respect the game.
Yeah. What's the relationship like between the offense and defense on this team? Is there kind of an understanding that everybody's got to get a little bit better, or is there any, frustration with the other side for not getting it done?
There's absolutely no frustration at all. You know, our locker room is very tight-knit. We love each other. We fight for each other. We go to war with each other. We work with each other on a day-in and day-out basis. So there's no, the camaraderie is there, and we love each other. So it's a tight knit group.
Yeah, and same goes for McAdoo. I mean, does it feel like the relationship between a locker room and a coach changes when things aren't going as well? I mean, it's harder. You don't get to go in and have those big post game rousing speeches and hug it out and champion each other. You know, you got to give those downer talks of what went wrong. Does that change how you interact with your coach?
Certainly not. We're a family. We win together, we lose together. At the end of the day, we're a family. So absolutely not. We love one another, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I've seen it, firsthand here in Chicago, and it's a slog when you get behind. But congrats to you on the touchdown. Hopefully more on the way. Congrats to your Bulldogs. Absolutely. And your Bulldogs giving you a good smile every weekend and a good W most weekends, too.
Absolutely. We got to keep that up.
My apologies to Tavares and Giants fans for saying the Giants were 0-7 last segment. You guys have won a game. So, and congrats to him on keeping the spirits up. Laura, I'm impressed that he is able to see the good side of even a season like this. Either that or he's just very well versed in the ways of radio, and he knows how to
let's not give him too
rat
much
anyone out.
Right. Maybe he's just over there like, all right, here's my answers again that I always say about this. But I do think, it's interesting when some of these players who make it to the NFL and who have played for successful college programs, they're not always that accustomed to losing so many games. And so it's interesting in how do you rally those troops and keep them. Obviously, they're getting a big paycheck, but I don't think it's always about all that for some of these guys. I do think they want to win games.
Yeah, of course. And, I think I mentioned, it's if you win, people don't really look through your closet and pick for things. But if you're losing, everything's up for grabs. People will say you're quitters, you're fighting. It's the coach's fault. It's the player's fault. It's the quarterback's fault. So, and for good reason. If you're not winning games, you got to figure out why. But it's tough to stay tough during that, and they are. So I guess good on them. More is in Spain coming up next.
Mike McCarthy, it's time for you to take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears. They run a jet sweep, and Glover came over.
Do you believe that you can win this fight tonight?
The North Carolina Tar Heels travel to Pittsburgh to face the Pitt Panthers. Coverage begins Thursday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Presented by the 2018 Ford F-150.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
The Texans were in a position where it looked like they had a chance to go to the playoffs, and now they're looking terrible, and it's because of their quarterback. And so, there is a guy who is available to make the team better at quarterback. Problem is, the gentleman's name is Colin Kaepernick, and as many of you may have heard, Bob McNair got himself into a little bit of a stink over something he said about inmates in prison, and there is this collusion grievance that is out there. And, oh, by the way, they're trying to get Bob McNair's phone stuff, and whoo, boy, imagine being Bob McNair right now. You need a quarterback. There is literally no argument left that there's any quarterback out there that is better than Colin Kaepernick. Oh, by the way, your team has also adjusted its offense to fit Deshaun Watson in such a way that it is very difficult for you to make the argument that Kaepernick does not fit what it is that you are doing.
Can't hear all 3 hours of The Right Time? Check them out anytime on demand on the ESPN app.
Russillo!
McShay with Will Kane. Okay, Bama, Ohio State, neutral site. Bama, neutral site. Georgia, Clemson. Georgia. Notre Dame, Penn State.
Notre Dame, tough one though.
Penn State. Wisconsin, Miami in Fort Lauderdale, and the kids have been there a long time.
Long time? I didn't think they have sunburn.
Ryan Russillo. Check him out weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Wake up.
Good morning.
And get up.
We are back and better than ever.
With Mike and Mike. Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just go to oneignoremyscore.com right now. That's www.oneignoremyscore.com. Auto financing the easy way. Oneignoremyscore.com. Get started today. Auto financing the easy way.
Keep it locked to the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
It was an amazing run, and I think we all need to genuflect at how Vin Scully made it his entire life without giving an opinion that would be viewed as polarizing. Kira, put it on the poll. Is Vin Scully's lifetime of non-controversial comments the most unbreakable record in sports?
The Dan Le Batard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNradio.com.
Go ahead and update the polls.
Enough with the name changes, Diddy. Agree or disagree? Is the turnover chain the best thing in sport? Does Andy Reid's play sheet look like a Waffle House menu?
The Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Football Sunday.
Touchdown, Esquire throwing catch.
The Packers face the second of back-to-back division foes when they invade Soldier Field in Chicago. Football Sunday, noon Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Jalen and Jacoby on ESPN Radio.
I know you love the Obamas. I know you love Jim Harbaugh. I know you love Michigan football. Another thing I know you love, Jalen Rose, adult beverages. I've got some adult beverage news here. They've done some research, and I found this kind of shocking. In the last year, wine and beer sales have been slipping a little dramatically. However, hard liquor sales are going in the other direction. I have a lot of theories as to why this may be the case. I think this is a health thing. I think that there are healthier options in hard liquor than there are in both wine and beer. Less calories, less sugar. Options in hard liquor. What do you think of that theory?
Get straight to it. You alluded to it. The bottom line is this: 12 ounces of beer or a shot of liquor.
Download and subscribe to the Jalen and Jacoby podcast on the ESPN app or wherever you listen to podcasts.
ESPN Radio Sports Center.
I'm Jim Basketball. Two-time Cy Young Award winner Roy Halladay has died today at the age of 40 when his private plane crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. The 8-time All-Star threw a perfect game in the regular season, threw a no-hitter in the playoffs, and won 203 games over 12 Major League seasons. He's one of only 5 pitchers in league history with multiple Cy Young Awards and multiple no-hitters. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson held their top 4 spots in the college football playoff rankings. Unbeaten Miami moving up 3 spots to number 7. They'll match up with the Fighting Irish this weekend. Oklahoma remains at 5. TCU moves up to 6, and it's those two that will match up this Saturday as well. Penn State, Ohio State, both falling out of the top 10. ESPN's Jeff Goodman reporting 3 UCLA men's basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, the younger brother of Lonzo, arrested in China just days before Friday's season opening game against Georgia Tech. The arrest on shoplifting charges. ESPN's Mark Slabaugh reporting a federal grand jury indicted 4 college basketball coaches who are among 10 men arrested in September in connection with a bribery scheme. Auburn's men's basketball assistant Chuck Person, Emmanuel Richardson of Arizona, Tony Bland of Southern Cal, and Lamont Evans of Oklahoma State, all facing multiple federal charges. Night in the NBA had the Cavs getting 32.16 rebounds from Kevin Love, offsetting 40 from Giannis Antetokounmpo as the Cavs beat the Bucks 124-119. Sixers in search of their 5th straight, leading in Utah 41-35.
Izzy in Spain on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Welcome back to Izzy in Spain. Sarah Spain with Laura Rutledge tonight. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Hit us up on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Big news tonight is, of course, the college football playoff rankings. Second week, and the top 5 remain the same: Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oklahoma. 2 big moves are the bad kind for Ohio State and Penn State, Laura. They go from 6 and 7 to 13 and 14. You think that was an appropriate drop after their big losses?
Yeah, and I got to admit, I mean, last week I was kind of thinking I didn't have Ohio State in my top 4, but I had them at 6, and I really felt like Ohio State looked like one of the more complete teams in the country, one of the better teams in the country. Looked like, hey, they would scoot right past Iowa. They would be in great spot to potentially contend for the Big Ten championship and then be in the college football playoff, and boom, you're coaching 18 to 22-year-olds or however old they are, and it just doesn't work out that way. And J.T. Barrett showed his inconsistency that's been unfortunately tied to his name throughout his time there at Ohio State. He'll go down as one of the better quarterbacks in Ohio State history in the record books, but if you really look game to game and if you talk to a lot of Ohio State fans, they will say that he had been incredibly inconsistent. It's frustrating. One thing though, Sarah, when you look at this week, we are going to know a lot more about what this college football playoff is going to look like, and I really think it's sort of a mini playoff that just happens to be the second week in November, and it's awesome because we will see Notre Dame taking on Miami. That will certainly solve some questions and show you if Notre Dame really is the more dominant team like the committee thinks, or if Miami can contend and put itself squarely in the playoff conversation. And then Oklahoma and TCU. You know, the one thing about this game that I'm really looking forward to seeing is that Baker Mayfield is obviously, as Oklahoma's quarterback, the best player in college football right now, and looks to have a complete stranglehold on the Heisman Trophy competition. But he will go against a better defense in the Big 12. And say what you want about Big 12 defenses, I really feel like Bedlam was a big example of why the Big 12 doesn't get known for its defense. TCU is different, and Gary Patterson's brand of defense is a little more similar to what you'll see around the country. I'm not going to sit here and compare it to defense or Clemson's defense, but it will be a more disciplined and a better defense that will test Baker Mayfield a little bit. So we'll see what his numbers look like there, and we'll see if Oklahoma can play any defense. And we saw Kirby Hocutt talking tonight with Reese about what this defense looks like or lack thereof, and it's hard because if you think about what the committee is asked to do, Sarah, they are asked to pick the 4 best teams. If Oklahoma has the best offense in the country, fine, but if their defense is not up to par, then how do you really say they're a fully complete team that deserves to be in the playoff?
You mentioned those 2 big matchups. You've got the 5 and 6 in TCU, Oklahoma, and then you've got the big one between Miami and Notre Dame, which is always a big one, Catholics versus convicts, and the history there, but even more so this year. Do you think that it's simply a case of the winners of those get a huge boost and the losers could just see their chances of making the playoff disappear?
I think that for Notre Dame, they might even stay in the same spot because remember, one game that we didn't mention that's also a top 10 matchup is between Georgia and Auburn. Auburn is the 10th ranked team, and Auburn has a chance as a potential 2-loss team. If they go ahead and beat Georgia and Alabama, beating the 1 and 2 teams in the country over the next couple weeks, they could be in full contention for the playoff. And so that 1 and 2 spot, if they do win and Georgia wins over Auburn and then Alabama wins over Auburn as well. Of course, Alabama would have to get past Mississippi State this week. I could see Notre Dame staying at 3 even after they beat Miami if that were to happen. But the real shakeup would be if Miami was able to beat Notre Dame. And the one thing, too, if you think about Notre Dame, they don't have a conference championship. So they don't have that supposed 13th data point that sometimes the committee cares about and sometimes they don't care about, as we've seen. And so they're looking for as many resume builders as they possibly can get. And right now, a win over Miami would be a huge resume builder, especially considering that it's on the road. So I really think if Notre Dame wins, they kind of stay status quo. If Miami wins, that shakes things up and they put themselves in the top 4. They'd have to.
Yeah, and what's interesting is looking at the top 4 right now and their chances of sticking around. Notre Dame is the most North team and the most West team. We have a college football playoff that is very geographically tight. And, as I mentioned before, the chances of certain conferences being well represented are good, and others could be out entirely of the Power 5 conferences. So anybody who wants to see representation from the Big Ten is really looking for a meaningful win from Wisconsin, and they need to do something above and beyond because they've shown going undefeated hasn't been enough.
Yeah, and it's a bummer because the committee doesn't love that. And like I said, they may not ever admit it, but they like this to be well represented geographically. And you want to see 4 different teams from 4 different conferences in there because that's what it's supposed to be. That's what feels good, right? But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And this year, there are so many scenarios that could still end up seeing multiple conferences represented, but you could also see a couple teams from one conference in there. And, the interesting thing is, if you look at it right now, Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson. Okay, let's say nothing changes and Georgia and Alabama go undefeated until they meet in an SEC championship game. If it's a close game, the committee will have a really hard time leaving one of them out. Let's say Notre Dame runs the table from here on out. The committee's got to keep them in. And then Clemson, if they win the ACC, if they beat a talented Miami that, maybe at that point drops a little bit if they've lost to Notre Dame, but won't drop that terribly far, then Clemson looks like a team that really should be in there. So the problem is when you think about it that way, who do they take out to put somebody else in? And that's where the Big 12 is over there like, hey, look at us. And by the way, the Big 12 for the first time in this college football playoff era has a championship game. The real interesting thing will be if that Big 12 championship game actually ends up hurting the Big 12. When before, the whole point was, let's have a championship game so we can finally be on par and be equal with some of these other conferences that have that.
And you mentioned Auburn. They have a chance to be a big upsetter for 2 teams back-to-back because Georgia on the road at Auburn on Saturday, Tigers sitting in that number 10 spot, and then Alabama faces them in 2 weeks. And Alabama's got all those linebacker injuries, so we have to see how that affects them playing going forward. But that's a tough Auburn team that's going to face the top 2 teams, and as you said, that could change everything if they manage to get 1 or 2 wins in there.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. So Auburn and Gus Malzahn, they have a chance to see Gus Malzahn be the coach of the year, get to the college football playoff as the first ever 2-loss team, or be really on a really, really, really hot seat. And keep in mind, because that would happen if they lose those 2 games. And keep in mind that Jay Jacobs, the athletic director, has recently stepped down at Auburn. So right now, Gus Malzahn's future could be hanging in the balance a little bit. And I don't know if we have ever seen a coach enter into the last few weeks of the season with more to win or more to lose. I mean, it's incredible what Gus Malzahn has ahead of him, and he does have a really talented team. And I'll say this, I mean, Jake Fromm at Georgia did prove last week against South Carolina that he could throw the ball, but South Carolina's defense is completely different from what you'll see from Auburn's defense. Their defense has been their calling card this season, even at times when their offense and Jarrett Stidham at the quarterback spot have looked anemic. This will be a real challenge for Georgia's offense, I think, because what they've been able to hang their hat on has been one of the best backfields in the country in Nick Chubb and Sony Michel and company. And without, having those guys able to run the ball as successfully as they have been, which I don't expect them to be able to against Auburn's defense, it could really challenge Jake Fromm. If he's pressured early, that is a difficult place to play. Jordan Hare, and we've seen some crazy things happen between Georgia and Auburn before. So yeah, Auburn has a chance to be the ultimate spoiler in all of this.
And I tell you, as you're talking about Gus Malzahn's future very much depending on these 18 to 22-year-old kids, I remind myself why I'm glad that I'm not a college football coach, because the highs are very high. But as we've seen this season, there are teams that show up for games that you think they are sure things to win, and they don't get it done. And if you're a coach, if you feel like you had them ready for it and they just didn't show up, that's tough, especially when they're young like that. So we're going to talk about your college football team a little later in the show, and I'm still looking for mine, and I think somehow yours might affect mine, or at least your opinion now that yours might be not doing quite so well this year. We'll get into all of that later. That's very cryptic, I know, but we'll explain it later. Straight ahead, we're going to get back into the NFL. Josh Gordon reinstated starting this week. Should we feel hopeful for him, or are we wondering why he's still getting chances? That's next on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
The NBA on ESPN Radio.
A lot of the pieces the Cavs have added are not great defensive players. New players, not great defensive players, terrible communication in those plays. That's why you're seeing them play so poorly.
And always on the ESPN.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
This is Rich from Atlanta, previously on the Paul Feinbaum Show.
Jeff Hawkins.
You could do a situation, Paul, where you've got Tennessee open, you've got Ole Miss open, we know Florida's open, you could have Arkansas open, you could have Texas A&M open. Who am I missing? And then, depending on how the dominoes fall,
yeah,
I think
Mississippi State open too.
Yeah, depending on then you get a Mississippi State open, and hell, there's rumors of that Gus Malzahn, depending on what happens,
absolutely
could end up going to Arkansas or being tossed.
And then Will Muschamp takes his place, so South Carolina's open. We can play this game all day.
So we got 7 anyway. We have 7 or 8, and I actually think there will be at least 6. You know what the previous high is, but I think
I think we're about to blister it.
The Paul Feinbaum Show, weekdays at 3 Eastern on the ESPN app and on the SEC Network.
Football Sunday on ESPN Radio. The Packers have dropped 3 straight and 2 without Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley showed signs of promise Monday night, but now they head to Soldier Field as underdogs for the first time in 9 years when they face the Bears.
Take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears.
Football Sunday. The Packers and Bears.
We're working our way towards kickoff.
Noon Eastern on ESPN Radio. The Ryan Russillo Show.
Andrew Luck out for the season.
He's 28 years of age, and we may have already seen the best of Andrew Luck.
I don't think it's hyperbole. It just seems soon. Like, let's see what 2018 is all about. Well, we already know what's going to happen, though. Whenever the next time he takes the field, never felt better. We're all going to hear the right things.
The PR campaign comes out.
Exactly. But I don't think it's irresponsible to go, we may not see it again.
The Ryan Russillo Show, weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
The Fantasy Focus Football Podcast with Matthew Berry, Field Yates, and Stefania Bell. Subscribe on the ESPN app or on Apple Podcasts.
Oye, amigo, it is Levatar Show on ESPN Radio.
Roy, was Stugat supposed to read something there? Because he was searching, he was rummaging through the garbage can. What he didn't throw away is what he was wearing me out with, which is, hey, Dan, I'm 24-21-1 this year against the spread in the NFL. He's dug up chicken shreds from 4 months ago from the bottom of that garbage can.
The Dan Levatar Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNRadio.com.
On ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge with you tonight. We are presented by Progressive Insurance and by 1-800-Flowers.com. If your football obsession has strained a relationship, you need 1-800-Flowers.com. For a limited time, 1-800-Flowers is offering up to 40% off best-selling bouquets and gifts, perfect for birthdays and anniversaries. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. We mentioned earlier that the tension between Jim Irsay and Andrew Luck would only be getting worse with that news that's been broken about Irsay insisting or intimating that it was between Luck's ears that has been keeping him out and that he should be physically able to return. We'll keep you updated on that because I'm sure, Laura, that Irsay is going to have something to say about that. And we might even get Andrew Luck on it, although he's been pretty wise and pretty limited in his comments.
Yeah, I would see him being pretty quiet on this, but behind the scenes, there would have to be conversations had. And here's the thing. I mean, he is totally, in my opinion, in the absolute right to come out and say something about it because somebody's over there trying to act like they know what's going on inside of his head. I mean, frankly, none of us know what's going on inside anybody's head. So
right, and
sort of crazy.
That contract is going to make things tough on all of them. Of course, you could try to pull a Kyrie and you know, if it gets too bad there. And I would say his agents probably have something to say about how he's been represented in all of this from the beginning and how it's reflected on him. But we'll see how that goes. Another team that is faring even worse than than the Colts are the Browns, which is actually Teddy Bridgewater. His return was announced, and Bleacher Report had a great cartoon out today that was Bridgewater sort of with the Shawshank Redemption theme, as if he's leaving the island of injured athletes, and he comes out and doesn't know what to make of it, but he sees the headline that the Browns are winless and says some things never change. So yeah, it's a good cartoon. You have to check it out. It's got of course. Why am I blanking on his name? The guy who does all the impressions. That guy. The guy who does all the impressions.
Frank
Caliendo, doing Morgan Freeman. His Morgan Freeman. Kind of tying it all together. It's good. But the Browns need something to look forward to as they continue to be terrible. And Josh Gordon returning could be that. He has been reinstated to the NFL. There is a long interview with him on GQ that hit yesterday by Clay Skipper, the son of John Skipper. And that's the ESPN president. I did not know that when I first read it, but I circled back, and it's just interesting coincidence. But it's a great story that dives deeper into what we all know about Josh Gordon, and the specifics are heartbreaking. I mean, you can be mad at someone for making terrible decisions, and I think there's a place for that. But Laura, I think there's also a moment when you understand that if someone repeatedly does things to sabotage their career and their life, there's a disease there. And it's so hard to criticize in the same way. And I felt the same way about Johnny Manziel, and that wasn't to excuse any of his actions. But when someone is stuck in this dark circle and they can't find their way out, when they do, I guess you have to be hopeful for them. And reading this with Josh Gordon and reading that he showed up for pretty much every game of his career, college and NFL, on some sort of drug or alcohol, that's someone who's not right.
Yeah, and you said it. Addiction is a disease, and as somebody who has people in my family that have struggled with addiction, I mean, you just know they're crying for help, and there is sometimes not the help that they need. And I think when you're looking at the specific microscope of a NFL player or a professional athlete that has addiction problems, they're enabled by their own access to whatever they want. And he's saying that, trying to talk about playing games under the influence of drugs and alcohol, I can't imagine that, but that was his normal, and that's what he did every day. That was his routine, and it's fascinating to read in just sort of a terrifying way of the way that he would go about, his ritual every day, breakfast, and then he would go back and get whatever drug he could get, and then get some alcohol involved, and then go out and play a game, and it's
and
just,
well. Really well, which is crazy.
Right. And there was also a telling moment in this article where he said there are a lot of players that play games high. And he said, but we're not here to talk about them. And that stuck out to me because I just thought, I wonder how many others are struggling with addiction or just struggling with dependence on something. And maybe it's not even that severe in their mind as what Josh Gordon was going through and has gone through. But, that's a problem, and it's something that I think at some point it's hard to ever address all of this because it starts so young. It starts in college, and if you're playing that way in college and having success, why are you going to change anything unless your life does come to a point where it calls for change? And that's what's happened with Josh Gordon, and I think there's reason to be hopeful, and I would never look at something like this as, oh, why are we giving this guy chances? Because I do think that people deserve chances, but one thing I would say as sort of the other side to that point is that, Josh Gordon doesn't continue to get these chances if he's not really dang good on the field. And that's why he gets those chances, which other people in life, not to make this too poetic here, but other people in life don't get those chances because maybe they don't have that type of otherworldly talent like Josh Gordon has.
Well, and I think he's an easier guy to root for because as far as we know, his mistakes have hurt him primarily. Yeah. It's easier to give chances to somebody who you believe has self-sabotaged and you want to see them treat themselves and their life better. And in the story, he talks about how the big difference for him in the past when trying to recover after rehab and find his way out was that he kept thinking that he needed to save his career. If I want to have a great career, I got to do this. And now it's a realization. If I want to have a life, if I want to be alive at all, football or not, I have to do this. And I think that kind of wake-up call might be the thing that changes things for him. Of course, only time will tell. But you mentioned when he played, he had a league-best 1,646 yards in 2013 in just 14 games. And he has missed so much time, and you have to wonder exactly how he'll be. But he's still so young, 26 years old, and could be a huge boon for the Browns and just Browns fans of to root for, something to get excited about the same way you get excited about rookies, even if your team is bad. Oh, I want to see what this guy can do. Well, Josh Gordon coming back, people will want to see what he can do. And I hope, being as open as he is, that will result in a really big safety net around him. And that's, I think, this issue started for him at a young age because of the environment he was in, because of his fear of the situation that he had and feeling kind of alone. And he needs to have enough people around him to, in a bad moment, not fall back into what was before.
Yeah, and you would think that the Browns will surround him with as much of that support as they can, and I hope they will. And I'll say this, I'm not a Browns fan. I will be watching to see what Josh Gordon does because you do want to root for him, and you want to see, just even from a football standpoint, like you mentioned, he has had a ton of time off. So what does he come back as? And frankly, what does he come back as when he's clean? Because that's what we should be seeing here is what does he look like when he's playing?
Will he be even better? Or was that somehow helping because it dulled him to nerves or something?
Right. You would think he would be better. But yeah, we don't know. And I do think that this will be really telling to see. I mean, what if his talent just excels to a whole new level, which is hard to imagine considering those numbers that you mentioned of when he was at his best successfully, at least we thought, on the field, dealing with certainly the demons off the field.
Other news in the NFL, in case you didn't hear, the Texans have signed Josh Johnson, who last threw a pass in the regular season in 2011 when he started one game for the Bucs. He has a career 57.7 passer rating. He lost out on a backup job in the preseason and has been bounced around to different places on practice squads and whatnot. So, interesting choice for the Texans. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Two teams in disarray after losing their QBs. More on that coming up next.
The NBA on ESPN Radio.
A lot of the pieces the Cavs have added are not great defensive players. New players, not great defensive players, terrible communication in those plays. That's why you're seeing them play so poorly.
And always on the ESPN app.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
We take for granted far too much how much playing around guys do with things other than their brain. Right? So our argument is, hey, your brain, you only get one of those brains. You can't be getting scrambled around because you see all the horrible things that happen to people when their brains are being damaged. All that is absolutely correct. But horrible things also happen to people when their other body parts wind up being damaged. And part of the difficulty that you're going to have very often with big guys trying to reconcile this stuff is this. The thing about a concussion is you can play with it. Because the rule seems to be for football players, if you can play with it and you can be effective, then you play. The standard for when you can play at the NFL is not about necessarily whether it's safe for your future. It's about whether or not you can play right now.
Can't hear all 3 hours of The Right Time? Check them out anytime on demand on the ESPN app.
Some of the most severe sanctions in the NFL's history resulted from Bounty Gate.
Everyone's like, oh yeah, they're just dirty players. That's why they won the Super Bowl and all this stuff.
In the latest sit-down with Ryan Russillo, we get the inside story on Bounty Gate from former Saint Jonathan Velma.
I put $5,000 of my own money to start the season. I get paid for violence.
Bounty Gate, tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern on the Ryan Russillo Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Mike and Mike.
Good morning. We are back in better than ever.
Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
See, very intrigued by the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
You're right on with Tyson here, because up until the end of his career, he didn't fight anyone.
Yes, he didn't fight anybody, and then he became a phenomenon anyways, because he was crazy, because he was young, and because his style was impetuous. His defense was impregnable. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
The Dan Le Batard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNradio.com. Dan Le Batard.
Does Trey Wingo sound like a 3-count chicken wing appetizer dish at a Mexican restaurant run by white people?
The Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Mike and Mike.
I tried to go trick-or-treating. I told my daughter, I said, Dylan, 4 o'clock trade deadline, 4:01, we're out the door. We're going to be ringing doorbells. We're going to get a lot of candy. And I'm about to leave, and all of a sudden I get a call that the A.J. McCarron Browns trade was almost near, and I'm on the phone, and I'm taking her trick-or-treating. This went on for about 2 hours. So the Cleveland Browns marred my Halloween trick-or-treat experience with my daughter. I'm still angry to this day.
Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Welcome to Between Two Rexes. Let's just say they were going to do a low-budget, clearly, life story of Matt Hasselbeck, because I'm sure that movie's coming out anytime soon. Who would be the actor?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rex.
Vin Diesel, any other bald guy
like
you can
Woody
think
Harrelson,
of?
maybe?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good one.
Who would play you?
It's not about me here,
Okay,
Tim.
sorry.
Matt, one of you Hasselbecks. What's the difference?
Sunday NFL Countdown, 10 Eastern on ESPN. And now, a Mike and Mike throwback moment.
Mike Golick, Ronda Rousey, we're on to the Marshmallow Challenge. I want you to stuff your face with as many marshmallows as possible. Say the phrase, Ronda Rousey, pound for pound, is the best fighter in the world. Golick wins this challenge.
Hashtag MMSayThanks. Presented by Amazon Music Unlimited. Football Sunday on ESPN Radio. The Packers have dropped 3 straight and 2 without Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley showed signs of promise Monday night, but now they head to Soldier Field as underdogs for the first time in 9 years when they face the Bears.
Take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears.
Football Sunday. The Packers and Bears.
We're working our way towards kickoff.
Noon Eastern on ESPN Radio. ESPN Radio Sports Center.
In basketball, Roy Halladay, a 2-time Cy Young Award winner who pitched a perfect game and playoff no-hitter, died today when his private plane crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. He's one of 23 pitchers ever to throw a perfect game, one of 7 to throw at least 2 no-hitters, one of 5 pitchers in league history with multiple Cy Young Awards and multiple no-hitters, 67 complete games in his career, trailing only Randy Johnson in the wild card era. PTI's Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon.
It is a shock to my system when I hear something like this. It always does.
Yeah, it's a shock to your system when you... I don't even think of the flying part, which I do virtually every day, not my own plane. But someone taking this young, 40 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have this baseball career, which is 16 years, and it's great, and it's Hall of Fame, but you're hoping he has 40 more years just to live
12 years in Toronto and 4 in Philadelphia.
He was an 8-time All-Star, over 200 career victories. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson held their spots in the top 4 of the college football playoff rankings. Unbeaten Miami moved up 3 spots to number 7 prior to its matchup with the Fighting Irish. Oklahoma remained 5. TCU moves up to 6. Those 2 match up as well on Saturday night. Unbeaten Wisconsin was number 8, highest-ranking Big Ten team. Washington, highest-ranking Pac-12 team at number 9. And Auburn rounds out the top 10. ESPN's Jeff Goodman reporting 3 UCLA men's basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, the younger brother of Lonzo, arrested in China just days before their season-opening game against Georgia Tech on shoplifting charges. LeVar Ball has been advised by counsel not to speak due to the legal nature of the matter. Mark Slabaugh reporting a federal grand jury has indicted 4 college basketball coaches who were among 10 men arrested in September in connection with the bribery scheme. Auburn's Chuck Person, Arizona's Book Richardson, Tony Bland of Southern Cal, and Lamont Evans of Oklahoma State among those who were indicted. Night in the NBA had Kevin Love scoring 32, grabbing 16 rebounds. Cavs over the Bucks 124-119. Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins combined for 69. Pelicans over the Pacers 117-112.
The Giants move to 1-7 after getting blown out against the Rams. Is it time for the Giants to move on from Eli Manning? We'll ask John Gruden when he joins Mike and Mike Wednesday morning at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Welcome back to Izzy in Spain. Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge hosting tonight on ESPN Radio, ESPN app, and Sirius Channel 80. Laura just dropped the bomb that she lived in Shanghai for a year in high school and was going to give us the lowdown on LiAngelo Ball's arrest, but we don't have time for all of this, Laura. It's like we only host so many times, right. And I always have, I think I made you speak Mandarin last time, or was that the case?
I think so. But I can only count to 8. I need to learn 9 and 10.
Still good.
Yeah,
you gotta get 9 and 10 at least.
The biggest thing is the fact that LeVar Ball was advised not to speak is the best possible thing that could have happened for LiAngelo and company.
For everyone. Actually, for all of us.
Exactly. For
LeVar
all
Ball
of
was
humanity.
going to hold a press conference in Shanghai to talk about his son being one of 3 members of the UCLA team who were arrested for shoplifting in China, and just somehow, by the grace of God, he has been told that it is best for him not to speak. I don't know for how long, but I'm crossing my fingers for a really long time.
You can only keep him down for so long,
that's
so
true.
we
But
won't hear from him.
Someone did tweet, what did you expect when you have a ball in a China shop? So really props and all the rim shots for that one. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Progressive is celebrating 5 years and more than 500 cars donated to vets. To learn more, visit keystoprogress.com. So last night, Monday Night Football, an absolutely brutal game to watch. The Packers lost to the Lions 30-17, and that score doesn't even reflect how terrible it was. One of those Packers touchdowns was a totally meaningless score on the final play of the game. Brett Hundley basically checking down on every play. I don't know if they don't trust him to throw it or if he's literally incapable of throwing downfield, but it was ugly. And I think, Laura, we all expect the Packers to not be great without Rodgers. He was very much why they were great. But it's amazing to me watching the Packers and watching the Texans that they lose these guys and that's it. They're content to just lay down. And I would not say that if not for the fact that Colin Kaepernick is ready and waiting and working out and gives them a much better shot than these guys, or than, Josh Johnson, who I mentioned before the break, who hasn't thrown a pass since 2011 in an NFL game. It's kind of confounding to me.
To me, too. And, I covered Colin Kaepernick in the Senior Bowl, covered him a little bit in college, and obviously have watched his career develop even more once he's gotten to the NFL. The fact that people are still just acting like he doesn't exist. I mean, what is going on here? And Brett Hundley, by the way, was a fine quarterback in college, but wasn't a world beater by any means. And you mentioned some of these other names. This is just insane to me that we are at a point where, yes, you hope that your Aaron Rodgers or your rookie Deshaun Watson doesn't go down. But sometimes they do, and sometimes they go down, and Deshaun Watson in a non-contact situation. These things happen. You have to go out there and look at the market and say, who is the best possible replacement? Who can come in and give us some sort of spark? And you're right, Colin Kaepernick would at least do more than these guys, even though, people could say, all right, he's been out of the game for a little while. Who cares? He's doing plenty to get himself ready to go. What I'll be interested in, Sarah, is to find out if Kaepernick really does take this one-on-one meeting with Roger Goodell that has been supposedly proposed to him, and what would happen as a result of that. Because even if he has the meeting, and obviously he's filed the grievance, but even if he has the meeting, what's to be accomplished? Because at this point, it seems pretty obvious that Roger Goodell has had something to say to teams about not having Colin Kaepernick on their team.
Right. Well, and if you look at this season, it's been perfectly set up to disprove anyone who months ago said there's just not enough evidence to prove that they're doing this for a reason. He's just not a good football player. And then you're like, okay, well, all of, people using their new 280 character limit on Twitter to say, here's a list: Brian Hoyer, Matt Barkley, Nick Foles, Landry Jones, Josh McCown, Mike Glennon, Mark Sanchez, Josh Johnson, E.J. Manuel, Geno Smith, Kellen Moore, Aaron Murray, David Fales, T.J. Yates, Matt McGloin, Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Austin Davis, Dan Orlovsky, Josh Johnson. These are all people
that
have been signed before Kaepernick, and there is just
Aaron
no way.
Murray. I mean, I'm sorry, no offense to Aaron Murray, but my God, and that's
most notable for his brother winning The Bachelor and then breaking up with the girl.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how did that go? This really is astounding, and I think that at this point it just continues to bolster Kaepernick's case. But the one thing from his standpoint, and I can't get in his head, unlike apparently Jim Irsay getting inside Andrew Luck's head, but I would wonder if he has to sit there and say, does he care more about playing again or winning a case against the NFL? And I would imagine he cares more about playing again, but I wonder if he takes that meeting with Goodell, if his lawyers, his counsel would advise him not to take that meeting. I don't know. I mean, I wonder how that meeting ends up factoring in. If I'm him, I want to at least know what Roger Goodell has to say to me, but right now it seems as though his case just continually is bolstered by exactly what you just listed. All those names are complete proof that there's something going on here.
And it feels like the window has closed. The opportunity is no longer there, even if teams are desperate, because there's just become such a, and it's absurd because there are so many people taking on the same stance that he did now and carrying it on and currently playing and not creating an issue. Right? Marshawn Lynch, people think he's fun and funny and good at football, and he plays for his beloved Raiders, and so that's fine if he wants to do it. Or Malcolm Jenkins, or all the and so the thing that he started carries on to such a degree, and yet the man who started it is the one who will continue to be punished. I just think it's been very fascinating to watch and to see that in every other instance in sports, so many excuses will be made for why all that matters is winning. And all that matters is having the best players on the field. To the point that there was a European, I'm not sure where it was now, but it was a soccer team that literally welcomed back a goalie who murdered his girlfriend and chopped her up into little pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was good. And we have domestic violence and accused murderers and anything under the sun that you can excuse away in the name of getting a good player. And this is the one that they draw the line at. That's tough to swallow.
It is. And I think, right now the NFL is looking for reasons to have more people root for them, to make sure that people aren't writing them off, to make sure that ratings aren't down, and all of that. That's sort of a theme that we've already seen throughout this season. So why limit somebody who could come into the fold somewhere and make a difference? And okay, whatever. Obviously, if Colin Kaepernick is Tom Brady, we're not having this discussion because no matter what he does, I think he would be on the field. He's not of that level, but at least he would be better than some of these options that have been put into situations to try and play. And one thing too that I think unrelated to Colin Kaepernick, but a point that you brought up earlier, is the fact that these teams truly are so different without their quarterbacks. And we expect that because quarterbacks are obviously the most important player on the field, and you can say that all day long, and I think it is true in many ways. But when you look at these two teams and, Aaron Rodgers, you just don't find somebody like him anywhere. And you see such an incredible drop-off, and it's why I think, some people said, well, why are we paying, quarterbacks so much money? And they deserve it, okay? Because if they're really good.
But also you look at Green Bay and you say to yourself, they have not won enough with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Aaron Rodgers. And when he's gone, you realize, what have they surrounded him with? Not a lot. So it makes you look at the team and the coach staff a little bit differently. Quickly, I wanted to ask you, and I want to put a poll out on Twitter, because yesterday LeBron James posted the Arthur meme of the balled-up cartoon fist. And we all know in the internet world that means you're angry about something. And he wrote mood, ... And the Arthur fist is when you're frustrated, when you're angry. And then everybody had to weigh in, because that's what happens when LeBron posts his passive-aggressive things. Everyone has to guess what it means. And it happened to be while Kyrie Irving had 35 points for the Celtics, to have now won 9 straight. He's probably sitting at home watching and thinking to himself, ugh. But as everyone tries to figure out what it is, he comes back today, and he's got the mood post with the Arthur fist. But then next to it, he's got photos of him at each stop in his career with high school, and then the Cavs, and then the Heat, and then back to the Cavs, like holding up his fist in like a fist pump, and it's like mood forever, #strive for greatness. So I ask you, Laura, do you think he does not understand the Arthur meme, or is he trying to spin it and recover from his post the other day?
Oh, LeBron fully understands the Arthur meme. He knew exactly what he was doing. He's being passive-aggressive. He's being a baby about it. And you know what? That's fine. If he wants to be frustrated then with his ex-teammate having success, then great. I mean, go ahead and just own up to it. Don't then try to have to double back and double down and take it back, because that's exactly what he's doing. And, the other thing about this, okay, not to get too meme technical over here, but if you post the meme and then you write mood, okay, that's your mood. And everyone knows that the Arthur meme is frustration.
Yeah, if your mood was strive for greatness, you would have used another photo of you with those
You're
fists
not
in the
striving
air.
for greatness with your Arthur meme fist. I mean, and by the way, Arthur's fist is getting more play than it ever has. But
Arthur was the dog, man.
Arthur, I love that show. He was
down with Arthur.
He was great.
I think LeBron got it, but I'm gonna put the poll on Twitter too and see what the people think. And straight ahead, drama surrounding Laura's alma mater. We're gonna ask her for the inside scoop on Florida. That's next on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Mike McCarthy, it's time for you to take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears. They run a jet sweep, and Glover came over for a beautiful stop.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
50 54-yard touchdown pass.
This is Pat Narduzzi, head football coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers.
Hi, this is Larry Fedora, head football coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels.
This is college football
on ESPN Radio.
Let's go. We came to eat. We came to eat.
Do you believe that you can win this fight tonight?
The North Carolina Tar Heels travel to Pittsburgh to face the Pitt Panthers. Coverage begins Thursday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Presented by the 2018 Ford F-150.
Football Sunday on ESPN Radio. The Packers have dropped 3 straight and 2 without Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley showed signs of promise Monday night, but now they head to Soldier Field as underdogs for the first time in 9 years when they face the Bears.
Take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears.
Football Sunday. The Packers and Bears.
We're working our way towards kickoff.
Noon Eastern on ESPN Radio.
DJ K-Dub checking in, previously on the Feinbaum Show.
Do you know who I think should be hired? Pete Carroll. And let me tell you why.
Well, let me tell you why you're not going to even finish your thought, because Pete Carroll is at the Seattle Seahawks and has about as much interest in taking this job as I do, becoming the Prime Minister of North Korea. So, I mean, let's try to keep it real here, okay?
The Paul Feinbaum Show, weekdays at 3 Eastern on the ESPN app and on the SEC Network.
Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Reaper, you're not allowed to talk! The Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats.
Halloween! Kids in costumes going door to door collecting candy. Anybody can spend $200 by a professionally made get up and strut around showing up everybody else. Those are the rich kids who get a sweaty palm full of loose candy corn from me. I'm Greg Cody. Yeah, that's how it was back in my day.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Welcome back to Izzy and Spain on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Sarah Spain and Laura Rutledge with you tonight. I'm glad Laura was here making sense, making smart points. I've been having trouble spitting things out tonight, but she's bringing the heat on all the college football playoff stuff. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All of our guests appeared via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You can hit us up on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Laura, before we get to your Florida Gators, I have narrowed my search for a college football team down to 2. And I believe I was just in the incubation process of figuring out my college football bachelorette conceit when I first hosted with you on the Trifecta a while back. And when I started out, I thought it was going to be Michigan and Oregon in the final 2. I just really like the Duck, and I also like the uniforms at Oregon. And
There's
then at
some swag
Michigan...
there.
Yeah, like I said, I had zero allegiance to anything, so I was going off of nothing when I started. But what am I going to like? And then Michigan, growing up, there are a lot of people in the town I grew up in, north of Chicago, about 45 minutes north, had stickers on their cars, and they wore the sweatshirt, and I just like the vibe. And then I'm a big Jim Harbaugh Looney Tunes fan. I just like his crazy approach to everything. I think it's really endearing. But over the weeks that have passed, it's been Wisconsin and Ohio State. Those fans have convinced me with the best appeals, the best photos, videos, the best, stories about why I should choose their team. And I think it mattered that they were nearby. And I have a bunch of friends that went there. And it feels like if I became a fan of either team, I'd have, Chicago bars to go to and the games to be nearby. So the next 2 weeks, I'm going to go to Ohio State this week and Wisconsin next week. Do you have an opinion on either of those schools? Which one should be my one true college football love?
This is hard because both of these schools have such rich tradition and great history and just the great stadiums. And that's the thing. I want you to pick a school that's going to have just an incredible home atmosphere so that, you go there and you feel it. And so for that reason, I'm so stuck between these two because they both have great home atmospheres, but I would say Ohio State. And one of the reasons why is because Ohio State and everything that Urban Meyer has brought there, they're going to be great. Say what you want about this year, who cares? You are in this for the long run, so we need this to be something that's
this is not about who will win this year.
Right. It's about rooting for your team and stretching over years to come. And I would say that Ohio State will always be this incredible powerhouse. And it's not to take anything away from Wisconsin, but there is just an incredible buzz always. It feels like they're at the shoe, and Columbus is fun, and everything about it is great. And I just think there's something about Buckeyes fans too that it's fun when things are going really well. They're a fun fan base to be a part of. Even when things aren't going well, they're a fun fan base to be a part of because they get so mad and they're so passionate, and they should be, and that's what makes college football incredible. So I'm going to vote Ohio State, but I will say this:
funny.
Don't take Wisconsin out of the running yet, because they're a team that, and a fan base and just an environment and atmosphere, it feels very vintage college football. So there are cases to be made.
It's not as much of a machine.
No, it's not. And
it's a big program, but it's not quite the same as Ohio
right. And
State.
we're talking about big hosses that, are great offensive linemen, and they can run the ball, and they're consistent. And, it's just, there are definitely things to root for from the Wisconsin standpoint.
It's also interesting. You're the only. I know all about the cheese. So it's funny.
That's
I was born in Ohio, and my husband is from Wisconsin. So there's a tie a little bit to both of them, and I've got friends from both. But you're the only neutral party so far that I've heard that said OSU over Wisconsin.
Huh.
I just have to say that. Every other neutral party has said, and not just people who hate OSU, they've just been like, oh, Wisconsin's the best. They have the best scene. Jordan Rogers came on my pod really early in the process and said he thinks it might be the best game day atmosphere of anywhere, including all the SEC schools.
It's close.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm being told that there's too many Ohio State fans at ESPN, so I should be the one Wisconsin person who reps on air. So we'll see.
I don't know that many Ohio
We'll see if I want to join the party or roll solo. But I want to talk about your school. You're a Florida alum. The McElwain mess. Did he hump the shark? Is that really where things... Did the team jump the shark when he humped the shark? Is that really when things started to go downhill? Why is their offense so bad? What's going on? Give us all the scoop.
I heard somebody say something about, McElwain just couldn't navigate those shark-infested waters very well, and it wasn't intended to have anything to do with that shark photo, which, by the way, wasn't him, okay, but it really looked like him. But, Sarah, this is a really unique story in college football because we will see a lot of coaching changes this year. I may see a lot in the SEC, but no one expected this one because Jim McElwain had won the SEC East the last 2 years, and this really had nothing to do with what was going on the field. It had to do with a tense relationship off the field, and there was recently an ESPN report that was done by Ed Ashoff and Chris Lowe, and they had a lot of unique details, interesting telling details about what went on. And it's funny because, these athletic directors are charged with hiring coaches that are really going to be difference makers and that they think they're going to be investing in the great future of their program, and they just don't always get it right. And Jeremy Foley would tell you, as being one of the better and more well-respected athletic directors in the country, that he didn't get this one right. And a lot of it had to do with McElwain sort of taking shots at the administration early on in his tenure there, wanting better facilities, which, okay, let's be real, Florida needed better facilities, still needs better facilities, but that's not the way to go about it. And I think that was an issue. And McElwain, I think, had this idea that Florida could be Alabama from a facility standpoint. And Florida fans and this program thinks that they should be of the level of Alabama. And they probably are in a lot of ways, not necessarily recently with wins and losses, but if you look at certainly the Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow era, and then before that, Steve Spurrier and Danny Werfel and all these greats that have been through there, they think they should be competing for national championships every year. McElwain thought facilities was important in all of that. Facilities were important in all of that. So I think that began it, and the relationship was tense. But one source told me that this was going to probably happen, where McElwain and Florida might part ways at the end of this season just because of results on the field, because it just wasn't good enough. The offense had been anemic, and he was brought in to change the offense. He refused to fire Doug Nussmeier, the offensive coordinator, who had shown really little to no offense throughout the time there. But then when the death threat thing happened, and when Jim McElwain was talking about receiving death threats, and then they couldn't substantiate them, And the administration said, well, wait a second, we take this very seriously. What's going on here? And he refused to provide the proof that they were looking for. That sped things up. And what I think really should be noted here is that Florida said, okay, we want to make a change here. Let's go ahead and put our stake down. Let's stake our claim for whoever the best candidate is out there, and we can do that by making a change early. Plus, we have cause in all of this to potentially not pay his buyout. We can reach some sort of agreement, not having to pay $12 million it was. And by the way, I think they're going after Scott Frost very heavily. We will see how that ends up playing out, but it makes sense he's at UCF right now.
Wow. Good stuff from you. I'm sure a lot of Florida fans have been watching intently as this all has gone down and probably ready to move on. Speaking of moving on, I'll move on from this LeBron meme, but I'll give you the stats. The poll, 68% think that LeBron was covering up a show of anger during Kyrie Irving's great game. 32% think he just didn't get the meme.
I voted. I was part of the 68%. I voted in your poll.
There you go. Straight ahead, Freddie and Fitz will talk to Reese Davis about the college football playoff rankings. That's next. Thanks to Laura for hanging out on ESPN Radio.
The NBA on ESPN Radio.
A lot of the pieces the Cavs have added are not great defensive players. New players, not great defensive players, terrible communication in those plays. That's why you're seeing them play so poorly.
The North Carolina Tar Heels travel to Pittsburgh to face the Pitt Panthers. Coverage begins Thursday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Presented by the 2018 Ford F-150.
DJ K-Dub checking in. Previously on the Feinbaum Show.
Barrett Lee from CBS.
This is the 4th November out of the last 5 years that Auburn has been mentioned in the playoff mix in some way, shape, or form. It's huge for Gus Malzahn because if he doesn't beat his rival, he's probably going to go elsewhere, whether that be air quote his choice or someone makes that choice for him.
The Paul Feinbaum Show, weekdays at 3 Eastern on the ESPN app and on the SEC Network.
Russillo!
McShay with Will Kane. Okay, Bama, Ohio State, neutral site.
Bama.
Neutral site, Georgia, Clemson.
Georgia.
Notre Dame, Penn State.
Notre Dame. Tough one, though.
Penn State. Wisconsin, Miami in Fort Lauderdale, and the kids have been there a long time.
Long time? I didn't think they have sunburn.
Ryan Russillo. Check him out weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Levitard. The Dan Levitard Show, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Keep it locked to the Dan Levitard Show on ESPN Radio.
It was an amazing run, and I think we all need to genuflect at how Vin Scully made it his entire life without giving an opinion that would be viewed as polarizing. Guillermo, put it on the poll. Is Vin Scully's lifetime of non-controversial comments the most unbreakable record in sports?
The Dan Levitard Show, now 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNradio.com. What made you laugh this weekend?
Guillermo, what do you got?
A-Rod and J-Lo were at the UM game this weekend. They put them on the Kiss Cam, and they denied us peasants of what we wanted most, Kiss.
Why?
They're usually so public with their displays of affection.
They're in Vanity Fair.
It seemed like they had no idea what the Kiss Cam was.
What a comeback. They're America's first couple.
They really are.
Catch more of the Dan Levitard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Jalen and Jacoby on ESPN Radio.
I know you love the Obamas. I know you love Jim Harbaugh. I know you love Michigan football. Another thing I know you love, Jalen Rose, adult beverages. I've got some adult beverage news here. They've done some research, and I found this kind of shocking. In the last year, wine and beer sales have been slipping a little dramatically. However, hard liquor sales are going in the other direction. I have a lot of theories as to why this may be the case. I think this is a health thing. I think that there are healthier options in hard liquor than there are in both wine and beer. Less calories, less sugar. Options in hard liquor. What do you think of that theory?
Get straight to it. You alluded to it. The bottom line is this: 12 ounces of beer or a shot of liquor.
Download and subscribe to the Jalen and Jacoby podcast on the ESPN app or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Mike and Mike.
Why did the Patriots trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers yesterday?
Going back to the spring, the Patriots made attempts to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo to keep him in New England, and they were unable to do so. And they continued to try, and they continued not to be able to get things done. It became apparent after a certain amount of time that they were not going to be able to re-sign him, that obviously the opportunities and money were going to be too great on the market.
Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
I love sports. I just wish they could be with me always. They say you don't choose the app chooses you. It is everything I could ever want in a sports companion. It can stream the games and shows that I love, and it's there whenever I need it. I never thought I could find an app that loves sports as much as I do. Until now.
Download the ESPN app to stream ESPN Radio and all the ESPN networks now.
ESPN Radio Sports Center.
In basketball, sadness from baseball today. Two-time Cy Young winner Roy Halladay has passed away at the age of 40 when his private plane crashed in the Gulf of Mexico. The 8-time All-Star threw a perfect game in the regular season and no-hitter in the playoffs, won 203 games over parts of 16 Major League seasons. ESPN Major League Baseball insider Tim Kirkchin.
Well, I'll remember him as a great pitcher and a future Hall of Famer, and I'll remember him as one of the hardest-working players I've ever been around.
Now, Halladay was also one of 7 pitchers to throw at least 2 no-hitters. He had 67 complete games in his career, one of 5 pitchers in Major League history with multiple Cy Young awards and multiple no-hitters. Again, he passed away at the age of 40. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson held the top 4 spots in the college football playoff rankings once again. Unbeaten Miami moved up 3 spots to number 7, and they match up with the Fighting Irish, and that comes this weekend. Meantime, ESPN's Jeff Goodman reporting 3 UCLA men's basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, the younger brother of Lonzo, arrested in China just days prior to their season-opening game against Georgia Tech, arrested on shoplifting charges. NBA trade had the Suns sending guard Eric Bledsoe to the Bucks for Greg Monroe and 2 draft picks, including a 2018 first-rounder. On the court, the Cavs avoided 6 losses in 7 games, getting 32 from Kevin Love and a 124-119 win over Milwaukee. LaMarcus Aldridge, 25. Spurs best the Clippers, 120-107.
Finally, there's a better way to buy travel. It's Upside.com. Now you can save a ton of money and get an Amazon gift card worth hundreds of dollars. Free. Save big on travel and get a big gift card every trip. Upside.com.
On ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
How you living, brothers and sisters? Thanks for joining Freddie and Fitz, presented by Progressive Insurance on the ESPN app and Sirius XM Channel 80. Believe me, the college football rankings each and every Tuesday gets everybody talking, and that is part of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. We're not surprised that the top 5 stayed where it was going to stay. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oklahoma. Nobody is surprised about that. But for my money, Ian, Wisconsin, like it or hate it, good and bad, negative and positive, they are the buzz team because everybody is focused on them the way they were focused on Iowa 2 years ago. Who have they played? They haven't beaten anybody. If they win out, they have no business being in the college football playoff Final Four. It almost happened with Iowa before they lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game. I wonder how much of that scenario could be in place in our future this season involving the Badgers of Wisconsin at number 8.
It's a duplicate of 2 year ago. I completely agree with you when it comes to Wisconsin. And I'll give you one other one to keep an eye on also. Up 4 spots in a 2-loss team, and that's the Auburn Tigers. They are number 10 in the rankings, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, and they get number 1 Georgia at their place this weekend. You are completely correct on Wisconsin, and they don't have a lot of meat left on that bone at all, and they haven't had any meat on the bone so far through their first nine games. And even though they are 9-0, who they played?
Well, it's not their fault with their schedule, because I'm sure they scheduled BYU, but this is the reality when it comes to Wisconsin. You can put that schedule out there years in advance, but if it doesn't work out in your favor, then you have to pay that piper that Wisconsin is paying for right now.
And this year they did not get the chance to play from the other side of the Big Ten in the East, Michigan State or Ohio State or Penn State, the three big boys, right? And so here they are. They're huge Michigan fans, and they are huge Minnesota fans and they play Iowa this week, coming off a big win against Ohio State. So, and then whomever they might play in the Big Ten championship game. Auburn, on the other hand, only 2 spots behind them, is a 2-loss team that gets to play number 1 and number 2 in the next 3 weeks. And then if they happen to win those 2 games, guess what they get as a cherry on top of that Sunday? A rematch with Georgia again in the SEC championship game. Auburn wins out, Freddie, and it's a big if, obviously, but they have a legit shot at being a 2-loss team in the college football playoff. But there's so much left with 3 regular season weeks left, and then obviously, the championship weekend. Georgia at Auburn, as I mentioned. Notre Dame, this is an elimination game for them this weekend, and sitting there at number 3, at number 7, Miami, another unbeaten, who finally got one big win, an impressive win against Virginia Tech, and then an elimination game for 2 teams, number 6, TCU, at number 5, Oklahoma. And the be careful game of the weekend, number 2, Alabama, at number 16, Mississippi State. Freddie, we saw chaos 2 weeks ago. We saw 3 teams essentially eliminated on Saturday, and guess what's coming again this weekend?
More chaos, because we're all going to love it, and the committee is going to completely hate it. But you know what? You signed to be a part of the committee. You got to deal with everything that comes with it. You're going to throw that at Wisconsin and other teams. Yep. You signed up for this. You know what you're getting into. You can even hear it in the voice of Kirby Huckett, who's the athletic director at Texas Tech. He's the committee chairman for the college football playoff. He was even having words fail him when it came to talking about, for example, how the upsets have impacted some teams, for example, along the lines of Wisconsin's Big Ten neighbor, Ohio State.
The beauty of the selection committee, you have 13 individuals that go deep into these teams that look at the complete resume. We look at what's happening, where the games are played, what is transpiring in that particular game. So all of that matters as we evaluate these teams, how these teams lose, who they lose to, and of course, winning is one of the most important things as you look at a body of work.
He's like Coach Klein in The Waterboy. Anybody got an idea? Anybody to help me out of this? Because this week you got number 12 Michigan State, number 13 Ohio State, number 1 Georgia, number 10 Auburn, number 20 Iowa, number 8 Wisconsin, number 2 Alabama, number 16 Mississippi State, number 3 Notre Dame, number 7 Miami, number 6 TCU, number 5 Oklahoma. As much chaos as we had this past Saturday, that's going to look like the golden days as far as the committee is concerned, because we're going to love it, and they're going to hate having to make those kind of decisions and putting Kirby Hocutt out there to speak on their behalf.
I was part of the mock selection committee about a month and a half ago, with Stanford Steve and Kevin Agandi and Peter Burns and others. And let me tell you, the first round that we came up with, we had to do the 2012 season. That's when it was a Johnny Manziel year when he beat Alabama, and you had Kansas State losing in the final week, of the regular season. It was that was chaos. Chaos. And Kirby looked at us and went, "You want me to go to the media with that?" Because our first rankings, they were horrendous. Horrendous. And we had to go back and redo it. And that's something I learned, that Kirby has to, and I feel badly for him, man, because if we were on that committee that year, he would have been crucified on our first rankings. And we had to go back through about 8 times in order to finally come up with our final college football playoff rankings in the top 4. I mean, and so for Kirby Hocutt, let me tell you, Coach, I feel for him every single Tuesday. But to your point, chaos has happened, and chaos is still a-coming.
By the way, 20 minutes from hearing what you have to say about the rankings when it comes to college football playoff and that buzz team known as Wisconsin. You'll get a chance to talk about that in 20 minutes. Keep the phone number with you at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Anytime we talk about the college football rankings, remember, it's brought to you by the 2018 Ford F-150. It does not just raise the bar, it is the bar. Wisconsin, for now, controls half of the rankings. What team controls the other half? That's next on Freddie and Fitz on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
The college football playoff.
Wisconsin controls their own destiny, and just be curious to see if they can reach their potential. You really think they're going to be left out? Absolutely not.
There's no ifs about it. Wisconsin is getting left out. You can book that one.
Who's in?
Football Sunday on ESPN Radio. The Packers have dropped 3 straight and 2 without Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley showed signs of promise Monday night, but now they head to Soldier Field as underdogs for the first time in 9 years when they face the Bears.
Take off the training wheels. Let this kid play. Live in your hopes, not in your fears.
Football Sunday. The Packers and Bears.
We're working our way towards kickoff.
Noon Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, this is pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just go to 1ignoremyscore.com right now. That's www.1ignoremyscore.com. Auto financing the easy way. 1ignoremyscore.com. Get started today. Auto financing the easy way.
The right time. It's always time for the right time.
There's got to be something miserable about knowing you got drafted by a team that has no idea what it's doing, and you're basically stuck there for like 15 years. Maybe the best thing in the world to happen to Andrew Luck, and maybe this is him putting his foot down on the situation, is not coming back to play this year. And the reason I say that is, how much better do you think Andrew Luck would make this team if he was out there?
The right time with Bomani Jones, weekdays from 4 to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio or on the ESPN app.
The Ryan Russillo Show.
Andrew Luck out for the season.
He's 28 years of age, and we may have already seen the best of Andrew Luck.
I don't think it's hyperbole. It just seems soon. Like, let's see what 2018 is all about. Well, we already know what's going to happen, though. Whenever the next time he takes the field, never felt better. We're all going to hear the right things.
The PR campaign comes out.
Exactly. But I don't think it's irresponsible to go, we may not see it again.
The Ryan Russillo Show. Weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Wake up.
Good morning.
And get up.
We are back in better than ever.
With Mike and Mike. Tomorrow morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Cruise to Alaska with Cunard aboard the most luxurious ocean liners in the world. Cunard's elegant voyages in and out of Vancouver provide scenic views of both Tracy Arm Fjord and Hubbard Glacier, all in one journey. Escape to a world of luxury and relaxation where you are free to do as you please. Visit Cunard.com/Alaska or call your travel agent. Experience the best of Alaska, only on Cunard.
Freddie and Fitz coming at you on ESPN Radio, Sirius XM Channel 80, as well as the ESPN app. So no surprise, no change to the top five in the college football playoff rankings. Georgia 1, Alabama 2, Notre Dame 3, Clemson 4, and Oklahoma 5. But we know that buzz team is Wisconsin at number 8. Let's talk about that with our man Reese Davis from College Game Day. He's always part of the college football playoff rankings show every Tuesday. He's here thanks to Shell Pinto Performance Line. Reese, Wisconsin gets bumped up to 1. A lot of people looking at their schedule from the past and their schedule in the future. They are this year's Iowa going to 2 years ago. What are your thoughts on what the committee may think of Wisconsin if they went out?
I think you're exactly right in terms of resume. They're this year's Iowa, but there are many people who believe that this Wisconsin team is better than that Iowa team from a couple years ago. So that's a football judgment. So I would suggest that Wisconsin's best opportunity is to impress the committee and make them think, yes, I know that their schedule, some of it through no fault of their own, some of it through underachieving teams in the Big Ten West particularly, isn't what it should be, but I think this is one of the 4 best teams. And I think that is probably their best path, unless they are an undefeated Power 5 conference champion and there are some 2-loss conference champions. Maybe Notre Dame loses again. I guess the easiest way to say it is I don't think that they would be a shoo-in as an undefeated Big Ten champion, but I think that, certainly they could have some things working in their favor, most notably if the committee just believes they're one of the 4 best teams.
RD, when you look at where Wisconsin is, along with Miami, behind 3 one-loss teams in Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oklahoma, is the committee in the first 2 sets of 6 rankings sending a direct message to everybody, schedule up or else?
I don't know, Ian, because some of it is, you look at the Big Ten and the number of conference games they play. Wisconsin scheduled a road game against BYU in the non-conference. Turns out BYU's terrible. And I'm not saying that excuses that. You have to evaluate the schedule that is played. I wouldn't take it as a message as much as an evaluation. I think it's a reasonable evaluation to look at Miami and give them credit for being undefeated, yet notice that there have been some flaws. Certainly their performance against Virginia Tech on Saturday night was terrific. And if they beat Notre Dame and if they were to beat Clemson, then all of these questions will answer themselves. But I believe it's a reasonable thing to say part of it, probably in Wisconsin's case, is schedule, and part of it, in Miami's case, is an evaluation of their getting credit for winning, but their lack of dominance in some of those games. But the good news for the Hurricanes is they appear to be improving and gaining confidence as we get deeper into the season.